Hello, Night Nation. I'm Trey Strelko, joined by Adam Eaton. Welcome to another special Sunday edition of Sons of UCF Live, a little brunch with the Sons. We're back because he's back. It's official. Scott Frost, the new UCF football head coach. Adam, everything old is new again.
Trace, I had the craziest dream last night. You're not going to believe what I dreamt about the UCF coaching search. I don't know. It's been a week since we were last live during a brunch. And if you had told me 7 days ago we'd be here, I don't know how many people would have believed it. But I will say this, whether you like the hire or don't like the hire, we'll get into that. There hasn't been this much excitement around Night Nation in a long, long time. So if that was one of Terry Mohajir's goals, mission accomplished. The excitement this morning in Night Nation is palpable as we wait a 5 p.m. introduction of, once again, head coach Scott Frost.
Just a little more than a week ago, UCF lost the Black Friday game against Utah to fall to 4-8. Less than 24 hours later, Gus Malzahn announces he's leaving to Florida State to become their new offensive coordinator. And then a week-long search takes us back to 2016, coming off an 0-12 2015 season. Scott Frost back as UCF new head football coach. A press release going out a little after 11 p.m. last night, announcing a 5-year contract to take Scott through the 2029 season. Quote from Athletics Director Terry Mohajir: "Today marks an exciting reunion for UCF football as we welcome back Scott Frost, a coach who ignites the spirit and passion of Night Nation. Scott's love for his players, along with his leadership, enthusiasm, and vision, were pivotal in making the decisions to bring him back to UCF. Throughout this national search, his passion for UCF was clear. I believe no one wanted to lead our program more than Scott." So no G.J. Kinney or all of the other names mentioned over the last week. Can Scott Frost reignite the UCF brand as he did back in 2016 and 17, culminating with a national championship? Adam, it is exciting to think about as we move into 2025.
Look, as the last 12 hours have shown us, it seems certainly plausible that we can sort of get everything kind of back and rolling again. Obviously, we haven't played it down to football yet. We don't yet know who's on this roster. We don't yet know who's on the coaching staff. So probably some other hurdles we have to go through. But again, the last 12 hours, the excitement has been palpable. I think a lot of folks are very excited about this becoming sort of the new era of UCF football, which is essentially the old era of UCF football. And listen, for again, you can love or hate the hire. I think it was interesting about that statement, Trace, was that last part you read. Nobody wanted to be UCF's coach more than Scott Frost. And I think that, if you've got a list of candidates and everything is equal on all counts, right? If you're checking boxes and you go down the list and you say, hey, these are pretty dead even candidates, but one person really, really wants the job and it wants to be that person, that gets the extra check mark. And obviously Scott portrayed that to Terry Mohajir and described that passion to Terry Mohajir. And he made the decision that that's the person to go with, somebody who will lead and die for this program versus others who may just see this as a stopover. So if all things were equal, then you tell me I got a guy who's got an infinite amount of passion for this, or maybe a finite amount, no infinite, then that's the guy I want as my coach. And it sounds like that's what we did here with Scott Frost.
Another release just out a few moments ago indicates a 5 p.m. press conference being streamed on ESPN+. Of course, men's basketball tips off against Tarleton at 1. That go to about 3. Media availability for that till about 3:45, and then media will assemble for the presser with Athletics Director Terry Mohajir and new UCF football head coach Scott Frost. It's interesting to keep saying that, right? Looking over where things were a week ago. Of course, the iconic photo and video, UCF releasing that as part of their social media blitz last night, showing Scott Frost and then Auburn head coach Gus Malzahn at the Peach Bowl. So that is an interesting backdrop to this. Our man, Robert Aronoff, 2 letters, 2 words.
Just real quick, if I showed you this photo and said, I've got a story to tell you about, the symmetry here is just unbelievable. Hollywood script writers might not have been able to write the story the way that it's panned out here. If you look at this photo right here and then fast forward to today, it's mind-boggling.
It is certainly interesting. As I was getting ready to say, our man Robert Aronoff, 2 letters, 2 words, lives in the Dallas area, good enough to cover the Big 12 championship for us. A little plug here, as you and I talked about, Sons of UCF, the only media outlet at Big 12 Media Days, every home and away football game, and culminating with the Big 12 championship game. Robert caught up with recent UCF Athletics Hall of Famer Shaquem Griffin to talk a little bit about Scott Frost and the culture that he brings.
And fair warning, if you're near a wall, do not run through it.
Shaquem, news broke tonight that Scott Frost is coming back. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's surreal. I mean, honestly, when you get asked the question of can we bring back the culture of UCF, you don't know if they're going to bring back the guy who brought the culture. And Scott Frost is a culture keeper. And to bring him back is not about accolades, it's not about stats. It's about the presence that you bring to make people believe. You ever heard of Deion Sanders? Well, we just got ours. Scott Frost is bringing back the cold front. It's winter season all year round.
How would you best describe the culture of Scott Frost?
He makes you a believer. He's a player coach, and from Pete Carroll to people like Scott Frost, he believes in you're bigger than football, and the fact that when you know that you're bigger than football, you understand the perspectives of your team to get them to buy in because it's a bigger purpose. It's not just only themselves. And it's just like a lot of people don't give enough grace to Scott Frost because he had to leave because of the benefit for his family. His mom, his dad, his new baby, his new contract, going back to his alma mater. But now he's coming back home. He's coming back home to repeat that culture that we need. And people, let me remind you, because maybe y'all forgot, the culture that created me, the culture that brought me to you, your Hall of Famer. You lucky you got him back. And I'm just happy that I was play a little piece of that. Cold front is here now, and it's coming at you year round.
Cold front is here. Adam, are you a believer? Anything here from
I'm freezing
Shaquem
over
Griffin?
here. Yeah. Listen, Shaquem Griffin could sell me ice in the middle of a snowstorm, and I'd probably buy it. But listen, the passion that these guys talk about Scott Frost within is you haven't heard a very few, if any, player ever say anything negative about that period of time. So hopefully that can come back. I think it's interesting. A lot of people are picking up on the Scott Frost being our Deion Sanders. I think that'll get him and get a couple of clicks and some headlines here and there. But you got to love the excitement that the former players have. And that just tells you that they also can get back involved and be part of that culture, come to meet the team, be a part of meetings, tell them what it's about to be a UCF night. Not saying that was missing under Heupel or Malzahn, but I think you have access now to some of the legendary players who can come back and show the youngins how it was done back in the day.
You're familiar, no doubt, with a quote, maybe not knowing who it comes from, but author Thomas C. Wolfe wrote about you can't go home again. You heard Shaquem Griffin saying, he's returning home. He returned home to Lincoln, Nebraska, and that didn't quite work out. I know something that you've been talking about all week is you can't go back to 2016-17. Who is Scott Frost today? And you can't really compare too much to what he had done at Nebraska. Different environments, different eras in college football. He gets a rebirth, though, back in Orlando.
Yeah, I'd love to. I know it's never going to happen, right? I'm sure there are HR reasons. I would have loved to have been in that meeting with Terry Mohajir and Scott Frost, right? Because what I'm curious about, and I don't know if we'll learn at the presser today, but what has Scott Frost learned over these past 5 years since he left UCF, for 7 years at this point now, right? What has he learned? Where are his missteps? He tried to go home. It didn't work. What is he going to do differently this time? I think that's an interesting part of this conversation is, life is about learning, right? We don't always nail everything right the first time we do it. So you have to learn along the way. What did Scott Frost learn in these last couple of years as he's been away from the game? With Sean McVay, by the way, who is a pretty good offensive mind in his own right. What has he learned about leading a program? What has he learned about leading a team? What has he learned about himself? I think those would be really interesting comments. Don't know if he'll share that today, but I would have loved to have been behind a paywall to hear that Terry and Scott conversation about those very points right there.
Who doesn't like a good redemption arc? These next two guys sure do. Parts of the Sons of UCF universe and family. Jeff Allen with the Big 12 Minute and Dolly Drama, esteemed columnist at sonsofUCF.com. Gentlemen, welcome into Brunch with the Sons, part 2.
Good to see you again, back-to-back weekends.
Yeah,
how about that?
Great to be here.
Dolly, let's begin with your redemption arc. It's all laid out right there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a long week. I can't believe the Utah game was a little bit over 9 days ago. It just feels like we all aged a little bit there. But no, redemption is beautiful. There's nothing more American than the redemption story in American sports. I mean, look at our modern football program, how it got built, where you had a George O'Leary fall from grace from the mecca of college football and rebuild us into a power in the modern era. So I'm excited for him. I think it'll be interesting to see where he leaves off, where he has in his headspace as far as as a family man, as a coach, but it's not like he was just schlubbing it around. I mean, Sean McVay is not adding people to his staff that he doesn't kind of respect and think that they can do something or provide some value. So I'm excited. I think, your next move is your best move. And I'm excited to see what unfolds.
Jeff, your reaction when the tweets started flying that Scott Frost was actually going to be our again, I did the same thing where I did make sure that it wasn't like a fake Matt Murcell I was falling for again, but your reaction when you saw Scott Frost as our next head coach.
So, once upon a time, there was a show called Dallas, and they killed off a main character, brought him back a year later, and they picked up where they left off before he left the show. And it was explained the whole past season was a dream by his wife. So if the last several years has been a dream that have come back around again, I'm equally nervous and excited by this hire. I mean, I think there are some things that we have to question. But the fact is, the fan base has been reinvigorated from the dark Gus days. So I think, from that aspect, getting the fan base back so quickly is a very interesting aspect. What I want to know is, were the outcomes of the Friday championship games the reason why the decision wasn't released until Saturday? I would have to think that they played some part there.
I mean, I think Terry has learned his lesson from the Mahajer School of Optics after that extended contract after the Baylor game. I don't think you could have brought a Barry Odom into the mix. I know he was back with Cartwright at Mizzou. I hope it wasn't just on one game. I think it was cultural fit, but I think beyond Summerall or maybe a Chadwell, I don't think culturally a Barry Odom would have fit with us.
Oh God, no.
Right. So we'll see what happens, but I am cautiously optimistic. But I keep on telling everybody in the group chats today, when is the last time UCF fans have been this excited in December about UCF football? It's been like 3 years, after the
Swirl Bowl, yeah.
And that's been teetered off after that ever since. And then a spring of hopium, and then we have our results the last 2 years. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I definitely want to see him win the presser today as well.
Jeff, right fit at the right time. The groundswell of support for Scott Frost culminates with this announcement. Does it feel like it had to go in this direction?
Well, I think it would have depended. Was Scott the first choice? I think that's probably something we may not know for a while yet. But at least as far as the people that were available and talked about, this is certainly the most exciting name to us. And, I'm just hoping that, Nebraska, that experience didn't break him. And I will also, hope that this does not, become a short-term hallelujah situation, that this ends up working out in the long run. And I tell you, I love a good redemption story as much as anyone. So I'll be rooting and cheering with all my heart and soul that this works. And as the great rock band Foreigner once sang,
Wow, music.
Sounders. I like it.
Gee, Dolly, whenever I have a struggle trying to put something in context, I come to you. So if I shared you this picture, how would you describe this picture now in this moment and sort of how we got from there to here?
Just for men. I mean, take care of yourself. No, I think, if anything, the coaching profession, you look at those two guys 7 years ago, definitely aged them a bit. What a 30 for 30 backdrop this could be in the next, decade or so. We had all three of our next head coaches in that building for that game, with Heupel in the booth, with Danny White. But I don't know, looking back at this Gus era, does that win against Auburn get a little bit tarnished? Which, have you ever watched that Peach Bowl through the lens as an Auburn fan? I did that like this season, just the frustrations we had with Gus here at UCF. And there was a lot of things up there just as far as clock management and points before the half and all that echoed a lot. So I think a just for men ad would be good. And then also just the maybe a caution, the heat of caution for people that are trying to get into the coaching profession.
Dolly, how has this fan base changed since Scott Frost left?
I think you're going to see people galvanize. I saw Kyle Israel posting from Germany, 6 hours ahead, excited. And that was a guy that I was in school with in 2007 when we opened up the stadium. He played Texas. He essentially our first Big 12 game on campus. And to see him be excited, wear his Letterman jacket, and also the fan base get galvanized from the Frost era guys to guys before him, to see guys that, he put into the league, like Clea Davis, to see those photos and to see everyone get hyped around it. It's incredible. And then I think also too, just the tongue in cheek or the snark of the national media saying the national champion is coming back to UCF, or, I had forgotten how weird Cornhusker fans are as well. Just very odd DMs and just very snarky tweets and just be worried about this or whatever. And it's just very different. I think he's going to be in a different headspace. I think an extraordinary set of circumstances that he had here for his initial run those first 2 years, but also going back home as a young coach, first real big time job, young father, his father had passed, just a weird window. He didn't really get to enjoy NIL either. Or the big booster support that a Nebraska can offer. And I think almost, they always say that the sequel is not as best as the original, but maybe that's what he had in Nebraska. He was a player in the late 90s and he brought him to the height of heights. And then as a coach, sometimes it just doesn't work out in that situation. But I'm excited to see what he can do. I think everyone's excited. We're looking forward to a 5:00 presser after we play Tarleton in basketball, on a Sunday in December. I think we're stoked about it. So what tie is he going to wear? Is he going to wear, a gold shirt? It'll just be funny. And just the optics of everything of him coming back. I think it's exciting for the city. And, we got to play the games. We got to suit him up, and there's a lot to be done. But I'm excited about the potential that we have back in Orlando.
What I find interesting too is, what will be different for him this time around will be expectations. By the way, these are expectations he created the first time around. So this will be a whole different animal for that. And I think also in that press conference, if he really wants to get 100% all in for the fan base, he should burn that red checkered shirt.
Maybe a fire hazard in the venue, Jeff. I know you, Jeff, you spend a lot of time kind of looking at the national landscape, the national media. How do you think this story is playing nationally of Scott Frost coming back home? How do you think this kind of fits into the 2024 news cycle of college football?
It's very interesting. I know you brought up the snark thing, that people, oh yeah, okay, he's going to come back and be the national champ again. But I think, it does kind of fall back into the redemption story we talked about, right? This is a guy that basically went through hell at Nebraska and, been out of the league. And I'm hoping that, remember how, coordinator or former head coaches would go work for Nick Saban to heal and revitalize. I'm hoping that the Sean McVay experience with the Rams is something that might happen here. From the national perspective, though, I think it is a great feel-good story. And I think this is something that hopefully we'll be able to take advantage of.
Dolly, wrap it up here. Wind in the sails for Night Nation and the program heading into 2025.
I'm excited to maybe we can see a spring game that's televised that, people that are not in the Central Florida area can see.
Don't get carried away.
Crazy. I know the admin is still the same, but no, we need to kind of retell our story of who we are and invite people. And I think Scott is going to be enthused to see our program in a different state. We're in a different conference. The commitment to resources is up the level. And also just what our potential could be with the P4 tag. So I think definitely next year with the portal, a benchmark. I'd like to just see us go bowling, maybe be competitive, and then also just the Scott Frost magic of a talent evaluator, just to kind of see what guys he has and stick that. But for these next few days, I'd like to see a staff that maybe has some a little bit different leadership, not necessarily just homer picks of guys that put on for us in the past. I'd love to see Mackenzie Milton back home, but maybe some NFL context as well for this staff that are looking to get into the college ranks as well. So I think, tempered expectations. I think a retelling of our story as the underdog, being scrappy, tenacious, having that grittiness that I think we've been missing for the last few years. We're not really part of the good old boy network. We never were a part of that. And I think that is our ethos of just going against the man. So if we can get a spring game on TV, get kids excited to see that brand of football back on television in the state of Florida, and hit the recruiting trail with his story, because you're still going to have Gus in the state of Florida to recruit against us. I think there'll be some proof of concept, and I think people will be very excited. And I think you're going to have a middle tier of donor base that's going to get galvanized as well. And we'll take this to the next step.
I think there's some irony in all this too, because, I've kind of felt like Terry Mahajer has gravy trained off of Danny White's success for some time. And now some of these bills are coming due and he has to make decisions. And now to fix his Gus disaster, he's actually going to play Danny White's greatest hit.
Fair.
Dolly Drama, Jeff Allen, thanks for being with us on Brunch with the Suns.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great day.
All right, have a good one. All right, we reach far and wide the scope of the Suns universe, and our next guest, we had to go all the way to Germany to tap him in this morning. He is former UCF quarterback Kyle Israel. Kyle, welcome in. It's good to be reunited with you on a program.
Trace, Adam, good to see you guys. Interesting times in Night Nation. I kind of look like, based on this video, that I am in Germany. It's getting dark here already. I'm at a play date with my daughter and her friends. So yeah, great to join you guys. Exciting times.
How about this? Scott Frost, everything old is new again. When this began to come together, you saw the groundswell of support from Night Nation during the week. Did you feel like it would culminate in this when you saw how the search was unfolding?
I tried to pay pretty close attention to what was going on. And I don't know that I thought Scott was a reality, let's call it 2 or 3 weeks ago. He wasn't the first candidate that came to mind for me. I don't know what the reason for that was, but as his name started to surface and I started to dwell on what the possibilities may be, why this made sense, why the timing was potentially right, where our fan base was currently from an emotional perspective, an energy perspective, he started to make a lot more sense to me. And I love a good redemption story. I love a second chance type of opportunity. I think Scott has a chance to build his brand personally along with UCF's again. And so, it happened in what seemed like a quick fashion. I'm sure Terry was looking at other candidates, as he should have been. But at the end of the day, I'm just, despite how it all unfolded, super excited and can get behind this decision.
Okay, let's talk about Scott Frost on the field. Obviously, you've played and watched a ton of football. How would you describe sort of his system and what he likes to do from an offensive perspective?
Well, it's been 7 years since I paid really close attention, and I think the iteration of Scott, at his time in Nebraska, but even being a part of the Ram staff with McVay, I think we'll see, still an up-tempo offense, various formations. I think you guys posted a video that was really cool earlier today with an interview with McKinsey, right? Talking about all the things, that he liked about Scott's offense. And I think a lot of those will remain true. Different formations, confuse the defense, a lot of eye candy, speed, finding ways to get guys the ball creatively. I think about Adrian Killens. I think about, the deep threat offense that we also had. But I also think that, there'll be some evolution. If he brings McKinsey in as a part of his staff, he may be integrating some of Heupel's system that he's run at Tennessee and at UCF prior. So I expect to score a lot of points. I'm interested in seeing who our defensive coordinator is. I think that needs to be a really key hire. I'm not sure that Eric Shenander the first time around was who we specifically wanted or should have had. But I think we're gonna be able to score points. And in this conference, when you look at the Big 12 championship game and what Arizona State was able to do from a point scoring perspective, we're going to have to be able to do that. And I think he gives us a really good shot.
All right, I'll take the next one. So Kyle, obviously you talked about kind of where the fan base is at. I know you're watching from afar, but how have you experienced the last 12 hours and sort of the excitement you've seen from the fan base on social media? Dolly was commenting before you came on. You have a video out on YouTube where you're wearing a kick-ass UCF jacket. You seemed excited. How would you describe kind of the excitement you've seen over the last 12 hours?
Well, I think kind of firsthand, I'm in a group chat with 9 or 10 friends, 4 or 5 of which are former players, none of which played for Coach Frost. But in that chat, there's been kind of a groundswell all week, kind of everybody pulling for Frost. And so like a significant level of excitement, especially in the last 72 hours. Nobody at the beginning really thinking it was a possibility. And then I'm not on Twitter a lot, just by chance, but I've been paying a lot more attention on Twitter because it's really my only way to stay connected. And I think, framed against the 2 seasons that we just had, and kind of where our fan base was from a frustration perspective, um, you know, I think it's an unbelievable turnaround. It's similar, in the social media 12-hour timestamp world to the type of turnaround from a fan base that we saw from 2015 to 2017, with Coach Frost going, taking a team that didn't win a game to an undefeated season, which I still think is one of the most incredible feats in college football history as far as turnarounds are concerned, with half of the same roster. So it's been an exciting 12 hours. I think that'll continue to crescendo into 25, into the spring season. And as he builds his staff, I think that excitement will remain. And although you could argue that there were more relevant, better candidates out there today, I'm not sold that there's any hire Terry could have made that would have this kind of emotional internal impact on a fan base like bringing back Scott does, and the story that comes along with that.
Scott Frost has to do an awful lot in a short period of time, and that portal
Yeah.
window opens. What would you think happens in that process now? Some of these guys on the current team have said that they're considering it. He's got to have a lot of conversations in a short period of time. Do you welcome back these guys that maybe had been considering the portal over the last week or so since Gus Malzahn left?
I guess if I was going to go in there, I'd walk into the conference room and, have a very clear whiteboard and kind of as quickly as possible with the people that I trust around me, really frame out, how do we manage the portal? Let's look at our team currently, and, what positions do we need to, fill roles in through the portal? Who do we have coming in from a high school perspective, and who do we have on our team today that's going to remain? And, I think that he's going to need support around him. You see this trend, and I'm just going to use that question to talk about this a bit. The trend of the GM, Andrew Luck at Stanford. I think that type of intermediary could really help. I don't know if we have the capacity to do that, but it's going to be a lot, Trace. I think it's really one of the most important questions of all. And, I would circle up, put my head down, really spend the next 5 to 6 days figuring out, okay, what is the overall strategy? But in the very, very short term, as the portal opens, who do we know we need to go pursue? And, for somebody like Scott, obviously he's been on the Rams staff. I think he's got very deep connections. I wouldn't be surprised if he's already done his research. There is clearly in-house data that's already been generated going into the offseason from the current staff about, who are the potential targets that we need. So it's a blend of, is there anybody on the staff that you keep? Obviously, Sean Beckton's a part of the program. He was with him at Nebraska. He was with him at UCF prior. I think Sean would be a great ally early on in figuring out the lay of the land. But I do think, in comparison, if you brought somebody in who was coming from another program, in the same time frame, what's the advantage Scott has is that this is not UCF, Orlando, where his office is. Like, all of that is not novel. There's not much ambiguity there. And I think that is an advantage and a head start compared to somebody non-familiar with the program, the fan base, the donor network, and, things as simple as like the facility and just moving in and getting comfortable and all those things. So I do think that's an advantage kind of in these first 3, 4, 5 days of getting going. And I think he's astute enough and will bring some guys in that have an awareness of, okay, what's the portal landscape? Who do we need to pursue right away? Obviously. And then how do we figure out in the next week, okay, beyond that, what's the strategy look like?
Early signing day was this past Wednesday, and credit to the staff that has hung in there, as well as these kids that chose UCF. Those are the kind of guys you might be able to build the culture that we've heard so much about Scott Frost.
Listen, you said it, Trace. What was so special about 2017 was the culture. So you need that. I mean, that's part of the DNA. That's part of the fabric of how he took a winless team in 15 to an undefeated team in 17. It was the culture. And I think if there's, what's known about Scott, maybe in the coaching world and the player world, and in the contrast to George O'Leary when he came into UCF, was Coach O'Leary heavily coached through fear. And Coach Frost, McKenzie would say this, Shaquem, everybody on the team coached through love. And he was very focused on the culture building. And so to start out with, players and potentially some staff members that have shown through their actions that they can be supportive of the culture that needs to be developed and built, then those are guys that you want to look at right away. And those are guys that, I think deserve at least a first look at staying a part of either the staff or the football team. And so that's critical at this stage. I'm thankful for those coaches and those players. But I think that it is even more critical with a guy like Coach Frost, who's really trying to build a culture. You're trying to build as strong of a team to compete, obviously, on the field as you can next year. But I think there's a balance between speeding up and moving quickly to fill a roster for next year, while also thinking about how am I laying the foundation beyond that and for the future. And so he's going to have to, play a fine balance of what's the short-term goal, what's the midterm goal, what's the long-term goal, and how do I make decisions based on that kind of timeline today.
Okay, well, there's certainly a lot of people in the fan base who are very excited about this move. There are certainly some out there that are still kind of skeptical and have some questions. And the main thing I think people bring up is, Coach Frost did not have a very successful tenure at his time in Nebraska. How would you respond to people who say, hey, he went to Nebraska and it didn't work out there, and so maybe why do we think it's going to work out here? How would you respond to that question or that line of thinking?
I generally don't care. It'd be hard for me to try to spend the time to respond to that. But what I would say, if I just really simply don't, I'm really focused on what he did when he was here. Nebraska is it's like being on a different planet in college football. You're the amount of pressure that he was under was 10, 20x what most coaches ever experience when they go into a program, because of his family, his time, all the things we know about who he was to that program. And then you pair that with his style of offense. And, I had a friend who was in the recruiting department for coach at UCF and then at Nebraska. And he has stated that it was unbelievably more challenging. There was way more friction from a recruiting perspective, in the sense of getting recruits excited about coming to live in Lincoln, Nebraska. Beyond just the day-to-day football experience. And you pair that with a Big Ten style. I think it was just overall the pressure, the change in kind of the recruiting landscape, the change in the style of football was too much to overcome. And they lost a lot of close football games. And, perhaps somebody will go back and watch a lot of those games over the next couple of months. Somebody has the time and go, how did Nebraska actually lose these games? But there were so many close football games. I don't know if that was coaching. I don't know if that was execution on the field. I'm sure it was somewhere in between, to be fair. But for me personally, had he won a national championship, or had he had the outcome that he did, it wasn't going to impact how I thought, or what I thought he could do if he came back here to UCF. I think if there's anything, and I'll be careful about saying this the right way. It's not anything on the field. It's not wins and losses. There are rumors about off the field things with Coach Frost and Lincoln. And, we have to have faith as a fan base and Terry and his staff going through the hiring process and really digging in and doing their due diligence and underwriting of Coach Frost about the person he is today, and what he went through in Lincoln, to ensure that there's nothing we should be concerned about there. But on the field, I don't have any reservations about what happened in Nebraska.
Cal, what are reasonable expectations for year one for Scott Frost?
Yeah, thanks. That was interesting. I kind of want to throw a lot of expectations out the window, but when you look around the conference, I think there's a lot of competitive football being played in programs that you didn't expect it from. I think that, what they've done at Arizona State shows the power of the portal if you can do it the right way. And I'd love to underpromise and overdeliver. So I think a 7-5 season where we can make a bowl game. Perhaps we're in, some bigger games, or we can win some games that maybe we're not expected to, is fair. It's a competitive league. Depth is in question. I think that Coach Frost recognizes how important depth is and how much that impacts you over the course of the season. And I think that's something we absolutely have to continue to build. But if we can be a 7-5 team, if we can show significant improvement, if we can be in all the football games, I would walk away going into 26 feeling really good about our ability to potentially perform. Now, if we bring in a high caliber, quarterback out of the portal, I don't know that there's anybody on today's roster. I think they'll be much improved at the quarterback position if the portal didn't exist, that we could still compete just because of the system that Coach Frost has, especially if McKenzie is brought in to explain and coach that system in a vernacular that's really familiar from a former player who's executed it. I think that would be a huge advantage. But that's a long way to answer that. If we can get a big quarterback in, perhaps we can do better than that. But generally speaking, 7-5 is something that I think is a fair expectation.
You mentioned McKenzie there, building his staff. You alluded to it earlier. That's going to be critical in this. Do you think McKenzie's ready for that jump from the current role that he has at Tennessee to maybe a more prominent role at UCF?
In the pure sense of coaching the position. So let's talk about a quarterback coach. I don't think I don't know, honestly. Could he be ready to be an OC? I have no idea. Like, it would be pure speculation, but I believe that he could absolutely do the job as a quarterback coach. It is, there is such a big advantage to a guy that's been on the field and recently and played in a system that you're trying to learn, that, is just a multiplying factor of performance, I think. And so in coaching that player, I think McKenzie is definitely ready. I have no idea in today's landscape, because I'm not in the building, of how much knowledge you have to carry about the NIL space, about recruiting out of the portal. McKenzie would obviously have to be able to recruit at the high school level. I don't know how much exposure he has to that at Tennessee. I don't think he had much exposure to that at UCF prior. So my questions would be there, rather than can he coach the position in an effective way. I think he'd probably be one of the better potential candidates for the job as a position coach.
2017, December, where was Kyle Israel?
2017, December, I was at the Peach Bowl. I was on the field while the confetti was dropping. I had just spent 20 minutes talking to George O'Leary during the fourth quarter of the game, in the club, catching up with him. And that day, or that time frame, was arguably one of the best periods of my time as a Knight, and one of my best sport experiences I've ever had. And I hope that we can find a way to experience that again, but just in Jerry's world this time.
Kyle Israel, former UCF quarterback. Thanks for being with us on Brunch with the Suns.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kyle.
Appreciate all your hard work. Thanks for keeping us up to speed, even us over here in Germany.
Take it easy, Kyle.
See ya.
Mackenzie Milton, you played, or you put on Sun Social that clip when he joined us a couple of years back. Why don't we play that now? Because he also speaks to where things stand with Scott Frost.
I prefer Scott Frost's offense over anyone else's, and that's not to bash the other guys or anything like that. There was not a time in Frost's offense where I truly felt uncomfortable or anything like that. But what I did love about Hype's offense is he kept what I really loved with Frost. So it was kind of a mesh of both. And I think I'd find a way to kind of mix both schemes. I like the wide splits because, it cleans up pictures for the QBs in the RPO game, and it kind of makes the defense force their hand and what covers they're going to run. But I love what we did with Frost in terms of we never ran one play out of the same formation more than 2 times in 2017. And I just think that, to me, that's an incredible stat, because you probably look anywhere across the country, nobody else is putting up numbers like that. Frost was always mixing it up with the looks, with the matchups, and he's really just second to none in terms of a play caller, in my opinion.
Never the same play more than 2 times.
Gus Malzahn's head just exploded. Somewhere Gus Malzahn's head just went like that. Unbelievable.
That is just an incredible piece of sound right there from Mackenzie Milton. All right, let's continue this conversation about Scott Frost with 2 parts of the Sons of UCF world. Christian Simmons of the Pegasus podcast, Brian W. Peterson, known for his famous mailbag. Guys, welcome into Brunch with the Sons. Christian, we had you follow Marlon Williams during Sons of UCF Live. Now you follow Kyle Israel. So we know how to set you up. Nebraska, how relevant is it to the Scott Frost that we're going to see as head coach of UCF in 2025?
I think the fair answer to say would just be no, it doesn't matter at all. Let's just move on. Nebraska sucks, whatever. But I'm having a hard time not thinking about what happened at Nebraska. And I want to clarify that I'm not in the boat of what happened at Nebraska has me thinking, okay, this isn't going to work here. I look at that and I say, yeah, they should not have made this hire, because I do think they're very different situations. I think what's holding me up the most is that in some ways that job is more similar to what he's walking into here than what he had at UCF in 2016 and 2017, entirely because he was sort of getting into working with the portal, working with NIL, and those are things that obviously did not exist back in 16 and 17. And I don't know. I don't think it spells doom at all. I think that the Nebraska situation was very weird, and the consensus over in Nebraska land is basically that they were too lax about things. They sort of let some things go, let some things slide. They focused too much on, not into the details, which is kind of funny because that was sort of what his pitch on culture was here, moving on from O'Leary, was everyone believing that, this is a new era and he can be more player friendly. And I think that that's interesting to monitor, because I do think I don't know, I'm not going to say Gus was really like O'Leary as far as culture, but I think there are some similarities. Where is he going to loosen up the culture again at UCF when he gets here and have it more be, we're your buddies? Does that work in the NIL era like it did in 2017? I don't know.
Weather on the twos. Let's get our AccuWeather forecast from Brian W. Peterson. What do you have, a parka here? What's going on?
It's a little chilly here, guys. I had to dress for the occasion.
Well, we know it's cold in Lincoln. Scott Frost will hit the ground running. How well do you expect him to connect back in the recruiting landscape in the state of Florida?
I guess you guys should have prefaced the brunch here that me and Christian were coming on, and we're going to be the Debbie Downers a little bit here. We're going to need to temper expectations.
It's a morning show. We can't have any of this downer behavior.
Right. No, I mean, Kyle touched on it quite a bit. This is a completely different scenario than what we saw when Scott Frost was here in 2016 and 2017, right? NIL is a completely different monster. The portal is a completely different monster. So there is going to be a learning curve here for Coach Frost when he comes back later today at 5:00 when they announce him. He is going to have to get caught up, and he is going to have to get caught up very quickly in the way that college football works. It's not going to be the same as it was when he was here. And I think that he has most certainly his work cut out for him.
Christian, I know you've been talking a lot on the Pegasus podcast about the potential for this hire. And I think you and I have been saying something very similar, which is this is not 2017 anymore, right? Do you think that the fans are we still blinded by 2017? How much do you think that will impact how Frost is thought of as he takes on this second tenure?
You're just handing me questions that is going to piss off everyone who's listening. I love it so much.
Enjoy.
I think that I've said this before on our pod. I think it's safe to say that UCF has a 2017 problem at this point. And I think that bringing in Frost is, while I'm cool with it, especially given who the finalists were at that point in the game, I was like, let's do the screw it hire. Let's just see how this goes. I think bringing in Frost is only going to exacerbate those problems. And 2017 was amazing. We were all there for it. We remembered it was the peak of my happiness and mental health. It was fantastic. And the issue is that it's just felt like every season is not, I hope UCF achieves its goals this year. I hope UCF can win 10 games. It's just, when is it going to be 2017 again? When will they be undefeated again? When will we be the center of the college football world again? And I think that's what hurt Gus more than anything, because it's like, I still remember, and I'm not saying that this is wrong, but 2022 was a season where UCF won 9 games. It was coming off a 2021 season where they won 9 games. My whole childhood, like my whole life, back-to-back 9-win seasons at UCF was cool. Like, you maybe weren't throwing a parade over it, but you were happy with that. And both of those seasons, barring just the Florida win after 2021, the fan base was livid, just furious. And I kind of have kept waiting as the years have gone on for that sort of feeling to go away of, when will it be 2017 again? UCF just did the one thing they could do to make sure that feeling never goes away over the next few years, and that is bring in the architect of 2017. So I don't know. What I'm curious about is not what happens if Frost goes 3-9, and we're all just going to hope that doesn't happen. It's not what happens if he somehow goes undefeated. It's how does this fan base react to an 8-4 season with Scott Frost? How does this fan base react to say that it's 2025 and 2026 and they've gone 9-3 and 8-4? Where's the fan base at that? Is that to me is probably along the lines of what success is largely going to look like in this conference for UCF. But for fans, are they like, wow, this was a failure, we need a new coach again?
Brian, obviously, from a fan perspective, a lot of positivity out there, right? A lot of good vibes. From what you've seen on social media, how does how do you think the fan base is reacting to this? Do you think they're taking it well? Do you think the vibes are higher than you've seen in a long time here at UCF?
I'd say they're taking it extremely well, almost to a point of we need to tone it down a bit. Everyone is super excited, and they have absolutely every reason to be excited, right? Scott Frost coming back is a dream come true for a lot of us. I don't think that, Adam, you said it earlier. If you had asked 7 days ago if we would be in this situation, I would have said you were crazy, yet here we are. But Christian makes some very good points, right? We talk about when Gus first came in, somebody made the comment about UCF being a pressure cooker. With Scott Frost coming back, with the expectations he had when he left in 2017, and with the excitement, the level it's going to be at now, the pressure cooker is going to be on overdrive. So I think the fans are extremely excited. Social media has been a buzz. At the very least, we're getting talked about more than we were just a few weeks ago. There's going to be plenty to talk about over the coming weeks now that UCF has wrapped its 2024 football season. But vibes are high. This was in a lot of ways, I think, a pick that Terry made to kind of re-energize the fan base. And we can talk about what coaches were available, and who was going to be in the final running for this head coach position. But this was in a lot of ways a vibes pick, I think, and it's certainly energized the UCF fan base.
Brian, what does it say about culture that Terry Mohajir was on the phone with recruits at early signing day, and UCF still was able to ink a number of guys who are committed to being at this place?
I don't know if Terry being on the phone was more about culture as it was he didn't have a head coach and he was doing what he needed to do. But let me tell you, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read the piece that was put out that was written by Tavion Swint. But if you need to find something to get you energized about UCF and the future of this program, go read what he put out about UCF being home, and it didn't matter who the coach was. Absolutely astonishing that we're at this place where players want to come play for UCF and not just for a specific coach. If that doesn't get you excited for the future of this program, I don't know what will.
Christian, what's the most important thing facing Scott Frost? Working the portal, managing NIL, or assembling the right team around him and his coaching staff?
Whether he's going to bring back this jersey.
Okay, well.
Pewter is the number one thing on Frost's list when he comes in, is make sure Pewter comes back. Rise and conquer, right there on the column. But other than that, yeah, I'd say getting
other than uniforms and colors.
Yeah, I think that the thing I'm most curious about is with him, and what I think priority number one is assembling a staff that is going to help you navigate this era of college football. Now, Frost has been out of college football for a couple years. He left when the portal and NIL were kind of in their infancy. That doesn't mean his whole staff needs to be that way. I'm going to feel infinitely better about this hire if he brings in coordinators who know how to navigate this world. If he brings in position coaches who have dealt with this and know how to manage the culture of a locker room when there are different guys making different levels of money, when there are guys who know that they can just hop in the portal. Because that's a big thing for me with, we talk about how strong the culture was in 2016 and 2017. Let's call it what it is. Mackenzie Milton has been very open about the fact that if there was a portal, he probably would have left after 2016. He considered leaving after 2016 anyway. And I do wonder how much Frost has to adjust that style to this era where if something's going badly for a player, you can't just say, well, they'll get over it and they'll be here next year. You have to work through those problems or they will leave. And I think getting a staff in place that can help you navigate that world and has already had success navigating that world and knows how to deal with it, I think that's priority number one to me. And I think the talent will come from there. Just making sure, because I think the thing we learned from Gus in some ways is it's really cool. I love doing podcasts about how highly ranked UCF's recruiting classes are, but if you're not bringing in guys who you've evaluated to the point that you know they can play, or guys who aren't going to ditch after a year and are bought in on the vision, guys like Tavion Swint, clearly, who's been very open about that, finding the right guys comes with having a staff that understands this era, and that's got to be priority number one.
Christian, is the starting quarterback in 2025 on this roster right now?
No, absolutely not. I don't know. I have a hard time. It's tough. It's tough to sort of evaluate risk because this was a weird situation he got thrown into. Just sort of going from fourth string quarterback to starter by the end of the season, and he looked really good at times. He looked really rough at times. That's kind of what you expect from a redshirt freshman quarterback. I'm trending towards no, just because with the portal, I think there are so many options out there. And again, this is not 2017, guys. Frost, this isn't a fairy tale story. If they can find a better quarterback in the portal, they're going to do that. Frost isn't going to say we're going to bring in the guys on the roster and coach them up. So I'm going to trend towards no. I think they will find someone in the portal. I'm hopeful it's someone young who they're planning to develop, because I think whatever 2025 is going to be way more palatable if you're building towards something with young guys, and it's not just we grabbed a bunch of seniors from the portal like what they would do under Gus, and that's the plan.
Brian, obviously a rebirth of 2017. Do you want to see the old slogans back? Do you want to see UCF fast, UCF fierce, or do you think it's time to start anew and retire those slogans and come up with something new in 2025?
So are we dropping the whole future of college football thing? Are we moving on from that now? Is that what we're doing? Okay. As long as we're not dropping our 2017 national championship claim, then I'm okay with it. No, I think you have to, right? I think that this is a new day and age. Frost was here 9 years ago. UCF fast and UCF fierce were a lot of fun, but I think it's time to come in and refresh UCF football. And I'm sure that Scott and the content team at UCF already have ideas that are going through their head. I don't have anything off the top of my head that I would throw out there as a suggestion. Maybe gold and cold. Might be some fun, but
Jesus, this is why we don't do live shows. This is it right here.
Something's coming, I'm sure.
Yeah, better than that.
Brian, Christian, what does winning the presser look like at 5 o'clock for Scott Frost? Brian,
I think he's already won the presser. As long as he comes out and doesn't say anything.
Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Frost.
Thank you. Questions? No, I mean, I think that he's probably going to give us a heavy dose of what he probably told Terry when he was interviewing for this job about how it was difficult for him to leave, how he didn't want to leave. And, he's just excited to be back and to get this thing up and running again. And I think that if he comes out swinging with those ideas and those thoughts, he can't go wrong in this presser.
I think as long as he doesn't open the presser with "we're going to be gold and cold," I think he's already won it from there. But I think if I'm Mahajer and I'm Frost, I think the way that you want to position this hire, and we'll see if they do this, is I want to hear Frost talking about how special UCF is to him. He's not going to go out there because of his connections to Nebraska. He's not going to have the presser and say, "I wish I'd never left for Nebraska." You're not going to get that quote, but I think the way you sell this hire to the fan base in the college football world is that no one wanted this job more. No one was more committed to coming back to UCF, to building something here than Frost was going to be. He had the most enthusiasm for wanting this job. He had was more excited about this opportunity than any other coach was going to be. I think that's how you position it. So if that excitement comes through and he talks about just how thrilled he is to be back, how excited he is to be at a place he loves, I think that's how you position this. And I think that's how you win the presser.
Christian, do you want former Knights on the staff, Mackenzie Milton most notably? Do you think it's time for some of the former players to come back, or would you prefer, as you said earlier, maybe a bit of a more veteran staff to accompany Frost on year one?
I want to ignore the greatest hits album vibe that I fear is coming to UCF in the coming year, because I think I have nothing wrong with adding guys to the staff who are ready for that opportunity and who are going to do a good job. I think like Mackenzie Milton as quarterbacks coach is one that's being floated relentlessly on social media, and we'll see if that happens. And listen, I'm not going to lie to you. It would be awesome to have Milton back on staff. And if Frost truly believes he's ready for that and hears good things at Tennessee that he can do that, and I do think Milton would be a valuable recruiting asset, then sure. But sometimes I just have in my head, is Mackenzie Milton an upgrade over Darren Henshaw's quarterbacks coach? I don't know. That's something you have to weigh. And I think you have to balance, the nostalgia of you bring back guys you think are ready. Don't bring back guys just because we want to assemble exactly what we had in 2017. You got to find the best guys for the job. I don't want this to just be a bunch of guys who have connections to UCF, but aren't necessarily the best candidates they could have landed for these jobs, if that makes sense.
Brian, same question to you. Do you want to see former Knights get more involved in the program and under the Frost era?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with us bringing back some former Knights players, getting them involved. We have a rich history of players that are dedicated to UCF football. So I have no problem with them, coming back and being part of the program and hyping up recruits and getting involved in the program. The more the merrier. However, I think that, and I'm going to be interested to watch as this unfolds over the next few weeks, is what kind of staff Frost does put together. To Christian's point, I think that the staff that he puts together, the position coaches, the coordinators, are going to be key in UCF future success here. I don't want to see necessarily us go out and pick a former player to fill a position coach role just because they're a former player. I think that you need to vet candidates properly, find the person that you think is going to do the best in those roles. Let's not try and repeat a buddy hire like a Ted Roof coming in and bringing in somebody that, is just, oh, I've worked with him in the past, or, we had a really good relationship when I was at X place. So I want to see what kind of vetting that Frost is going to do on the position coaches that he brings in. And I'm sure he understands how important that is.
I just love that Ted Roof's still catching strays. He's not even here anymore. We're still throwing strays at Ted Roof. I love it.
He's getting paid
Ryan,
enough.
What's different about this? What's different about this fan base since Scott Frost left?
Well, it's a completely different fan base since Scott Frost left. I mean, like I said, we're going on almost the better part of a decade since he's been here. So the fan base has turned over quite a bit. I mean, we've had just from an institution perspective, we graduated almost 100,000 more students at UCF since Scott Frost has been gone. That's a nugget of information. I did some digging last night and some facts and figures and all that stuff.
I trust your math.
Of course you did. Yeah,
it's there's a bunch that's changed since. I mean, and even the expectations are higher, right? When Frost walked in here in 2016, nobody had the expectations that we were going to be playing in the Peach Bowl and that we were going to be, vying for conference championships. We were coming off a winless season. We went 6-7 in his first year. Now the expectations are completely different, right? The fan base has come into this particular year, 2024, with renewed expectations that we were going to compete for the Big 12, right? And that obviously didn't happen. So I think that with Frost coming in, the idea that we're going to have lower expectations, considering the success he had when he was here in 2017, is going to be, like I said, that pressure cooker is going to be turned up quite a bit, I think.
Christian, pressure cooker, Scott Frost coming into, or is that overstating?
I don't know. I honestly laughed at that comment when it was made at Gus's presser about the pressure cooker, especially when he was coming from Auburn. But the pressure actually heated up pretty quick on Gus here. So maybe I should have been a little more accepting of that comment. But I guess the pressure is just, I'm really curious to see, and I think how the offseason goes will dictate this to a degree, but I'm really curious to see what fans are actually expecting from next season, from year one. Are fans going to seriously, because like if even us here, and if you're on this, if you're one of the viewers right now, like we're obviously diehards, we're very committed to this, we know a lot about UCF. Is the average fan just going to see Scott Frost hired and think, okay, they're gonna be great again, they're gonna win 10 games? And I'm curious when that doesn't happen, because guys, that is not happening next year. How does the general fan base react to that? Are they still behind Frost no matter what? Or do they start to feel like, oh, wait, no, this doesn't make sense. Why didn't he just pick up where he left off 7 years ago when UCF was in a different conference? I don't know.
Here's what I know for sure. The hiring of Scott Frost is good for content creation and podcasts like the Pegasus podcast and the Sons of UCF. Christian Simmons, Brian W. Peterson, thanks for being with us on Brunch with the Sons Part 2.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Adam, pressure cooker. What do you think? Overstated? I mean, it is a different fan base. That statistic from Brian is interesting. How many new alums there have been since Scott Frost was on the campus? But expectations, especially being in the Big 12, and you see what Arizona State has done, picked last and now winning the Big 12. Where do you think on that?
Hey, can you turn a pressure cooker up? I know Brian kept saying that. I thought you said it and forget it, but I could be wrong on the pressure cooker. But listen, I think year one, I think Scott Frost will get a bit of a pass, right? I think you need to see appreciable improvement over what you saw last year, right? In 4-8. So maybe you need to get that 5, 6, 7 win mark. I hope anyone's not expecting us to be Arizona State next year. It'd be great if we are, but I don't think we should expect that. So I don't think the pressure cooker really churns in until like year 2 or year 3. I think year 1 he gets a bit of a pass, feel good story, hey, we're getting there, we're building. But years 2 and 3, if you don't see improvement, I think you're going to start hearing as the game passed him by. See, it's why you don't hire a guy who's been out from the football for so long. See, he fell to Nebraska. I think you start getting that stuff in years 2 and 3.
Let's continue this conversation with the star of Around the Kingdom. He is Eric Lopez, and as well, Suns Go Hard beat reporter Andrew Cherico joins us now. Welcome into Sons of UCF, the brunch edition, guys. Hello.
How's it going, guys? Happy brunch.
Oh, here we go.
We're drinking again.
Wow.
This is why people tune in. Eric, let's begin with you. Vibes. Boy, things have changed in a little over a week since the thud of that Black Friday loss. You can feel a change in energy within the UCF community.
No doubt. Well, first of all, you talk about pressure cooker. I wake up to Trace talking to Kyle Israel from the past, a little historic nostalgia there. And now there's a guy named Andrew on the show. I feel like am I about to get Ted Roof out of here Around the Kingdom?
Another Ted Roof. Second Ted Roof of the day.
All right, bringing in Ted Roof now. Ted's not doing anything.
All right, no. Listen, yeah, it's been crazy. This has been one of the most craziest UCF stories that I can ever remember covering and being around it. With the emotional twist as this thing just kind of played out with a lot of the former players pushing for Frost and just all the rumors and innuendo and how the search was going. It's remarkable, and it's great to see so many people kind of rally around this, whether you think it'll work out or not, whether you think it is. It's pretty remarkable that I think if you're UCF, you're feeling pretty good with the momentum here going into next year and having a guy that could come back home again for a second time. It's a pretty cool human story if you're into that, which I am.
Andrew, you're a UCF student currently. What does Scott Frost mean to you?
So Scott, when I got to UCF, it was 2023, 2022-ish virtual semester. I had heard at the time when I was looking around for colleges to go to when I was in high school, that was an option my uncle brought to me. He's like, they have a great athletics program. You know, you want to be a journalist. This could be a great place. And looking back on the 2017 season, it's like, okay, that's where UCF was officially established. That's where they became UCF at that time. And going back and looking back now as a student, it's like, can we go back to that season? I would love that season again. It feels like a Disney movie, kind of making this whole circle come around. And obviously, you know, a Disney movie ending would be a nice season, but expectations need to be lowered. But as a student here, I think you feel some excitement again for this coaching position. You get to experience almost like you missed out the first time, so here's a second chance. But I hope the second chance is pretty good.
All right, Andrew and Eric, both. I'll ask you both this question. I'll start with you, though, Andrew. Shaquem Griffin last night in the video that our friend Robert got from Big 12 Conference Championship says Scott Frost is our version of Deion Sanders. I know Deion Sanders holds a place near and dear to you, Andrew, so I'll start this one with you. Is Scott Frost UCF's Deion Sanders?
I would say in terms of culture, yes. Obviously, Scott Frost doesn't have the public name of primetime Deion Sanders, NFL Hall of Famer. But Scott Frost to UCF means so much more than any of that celebrity talk could ever mean. He means a guy who brought a culture to UCF, brought fans around football, elevated UCF football to a place it's never seen before. So when Shaquem is talking about when Shaquem is talking about UCF, Deion being the Scott Frost being the Deion to UCF, it's the culture that he's talking about, the culture that he's bringing to the program.
Derek Lopez?
I think you can make that case. I mean, I don't know if there was another hire outside of like Nick Saban in his prime that would have gotten the fans this excited about it. Like I was talking to a shareholder friend of mine, I'm going to remain nameless, but is a fan of the show. He's like, I'm just glad we didn't hire the Costanza lookalike. And he was speaking of Barry Odom, who compared to Costanza, which actually, if you think about it, have we really seen Jason Alexander and Barry Odom in the same room? Probably not. So have fun in Purdue, by the way. Barry.
Probably not.
Probably not. What's Jason done since Seinfeld? But anyway.
Was Ted Roof there? Is that the other question? Was Ted Roof also with them? I don't know.
I might be the only defensive coordinator Barry gets to bring to Purdue. I mean, who the heck wants to go? By the way, Barry Odom, the only guy that's willing to leave Vegas to go to West Lafayette, Indiana. That right there is a big red concern. But anyway, I think he's the guy that is going to bring a lot of the donors, the alums together and actually help with the resources and basically invest in the program, literally. I'm not sure there was another hire that in retrospect could have done that. So from that standpoint, bringing that buzz, kind of like what Dion did to Colorado, I think to that degree, yes, I think Scott Frost is to some extent UCF's version of Dion.
Elo, a lot of talk is made of you can't go back to a place again. And I think we forget maybe Bill Snyder at Kansas State. He was successful in his second incarnation. Has Scott Frost been removed from UCF enough that it is really a new job, a new era? It's right. It's a fresh start for him. It's a different era of college football, so he can come in. Fan expectations may be comparing it to 2017, but it's a new job.
It is a new job, but I think he'll adapt to it quickly enough. I think he'll surround himself with people that know what to do in that situation. You mentioned obviously some of the examples. I mean, I think of a Greg Schiano, for example. Greg Schiano has done the Rutgers twice and has been successful. I think in both times he's been at Rutgers. He's getting into the bowl game. By the way, Danny White's first choice for the UCF football job, just to remind people that may not have been around. So it wasn't like Scott was the first option back then. So, yeah, I do think he can surround himself. And I think, I remember something that, Adam, you said on Suns Live. I think it was Suns Live. Might have been Overtime. I don't remember which show. You've been on a few shows. But you said that you didn't want Scott Frost 2017. You wanted the Scott Frost 2024, right? Version of there.
Yep.
Which I think is correct, 100%. You're dead on. I think my counter to this, I think Scott Frost 2024 is more appreciative of the UCF job and UCF than Scott Frost 2015, 2016. When he got here the first time, I think he was just thinking, all right, this is a stepping stone job. I'm going to do my thing here, get my on the resume, and then end up in Nebraska at some point. This Scott Frost really wants to be here. And I think he's probably the guy of all the people that Terry Mohajir interviewed. I would be willing to bet that he was the most passionate about UCF because he knows what he saw the first time around. And so from that standpoint, I think that's exciting. I think Scott Frost is 100% committed to it. He's got a lot of people that are backing him, which I'm not sure any other UCF coach would have had that full support. So I do think he'll adapt to that very well. And the biggest key is, can he evaluate talent like he did the first time around? If he does, then I think we might have a fun sequel, as Andrew alluded to.
Andrew, what strikes you most about what you've taken in since this news broke? Matt Michelle breaking it on Saturday. That you've heard comments, national media, UCF fans. What stands out to you? Players as well commenting. What's something that resonates with you?
I quickly have to address chat. I am not drunk. I promise this was just like I said Shaquem by accident. It came out like Shaquem. I know Shaquem. That's my guy. I have to be at Tarleton State at 1 p.m. But
keep drinking. Keep drinking.
Yeah, you might as well.
No, but it's when the news broke, it was more like, is this actually happening? You heard the GJ Kinney, you've heard the Chadwells, you heard even the Sumralls, and you're like, okay, Scott Frost is a dark horse. And then slowly over time, Scott Frost is like, this could be the guy for the job. Is he the favorite? This and that. And then eventually like, okay, Scott Frost is the guy. And now it's just, okay, now he's the guy. What can we expect? How can this change? You've had players all over, former players, current players all over social media love this hire. They've been putting the Frost emojis. They've been talking about the culture he's bringing. Shout out to Shaquem. And it's been excellent seeing that the fan base, not only the fan base, but the former players are rallying around UCF and the culture that might be coming.
Andrew, you're going to be at the press conference today when Scott Frost is introduced. What's one question you want to ask him?
Ooh, I was thinking about that. It's more, I would say, over the time, what has he learned from his departure from UCF? What is something that he can take away that he wants to bring back? Like you said, he's had plenty of jobs. He's an analyst for the Rams now. What can he bring back? And then also, as Christian was mentioning earlier, how special is UCF to him? Does he feel – okay, well, the question I was thinking was, I'm going to release the tea.
Oh,
did any coach want this job more than you? Were you the number one guy who wanted this job? And
it's gonna be really bad if he says, "Yeah, Barry Odom was really into this." Ted Roof really wanted this job.
Yeah, that's all I'd ask.
Elo, what does Scott Frost have to do to win the press conference today, or just by him walking in, has he already won?
I would say as long as he's got a good suit going. I mean, the guy the first time around, people noticed he's the ladies liked him. Let's just leave it as that. But I think. Listen, I think I am fascinated to see how he does treat the media. I covered him the first time around. He was not the most exciting quote, especially in his first year. Second year, he started to open up a little bit more at the end. I am kind of curious what he says. Does he mention, hey, this place? I'm really intrigued to hear not necessarily what he has to say, but his tone. I'm really fascinated to hear his tone, and the question that I would ask is what came to his mind coming back to this campus. I'm really curious what went in his head as he got back on campus. I don't know what time he's supposed to supposedly arrive in Orlando around 1:40 or 2 o'clock. I'm not sure. But I am curious when he steps to see the bounce house for the first time, or he sees some of the buildings at UCF, what pops into his mind, because it's really fascinating. I mean, I don't know the last time he's been on campus. You guys might know. Maybe was it literally after the bowl game and the PH Bowl that was the last time he was on campus for a lengthy period of time? I don't know. So I'm really interested to see if what popped in his head as soon as he arrives here on campus.
Andrew, does he have a total rebuild here, or are there some pieces that he can work with to make 2025 a good season?
I would say it's closer to like an 80% rebuild. Obviously, you have some pieces. You want to keep as many veteran guys on the team, guys who can establish the culture quickly. As mentioned before, Terry was still keeping some recruits, although UCF dropped heavily in the 2025 commitment standings. There's still a bunch of solid guys, a bunch of 4-star players. The running backs on the squad. UCF is always going to be a running back heavy team. I think you keep those guys around. And then the big one, the quarterback position. I think you keep the quarterback room, but you bring in some more talent for competition. I can't imagine that Frost is complacent with the quarterback room.
Elo, biggest rebuild since when?
Since the first time he was here. That's what he's taken over another rebuild. Maybe not as big as the O'Leary front, but in some ways maybe, because I think we found out he had talent on that roster in 2016. They just all quit on O'Leary. This time, I don't know what talent he has back. Can you name me what players you feel comfortable that are coming back that you're excited about? So I do think they're going to be active in the portal. I think we'll see what young players he's got. I think you got to be patient. I think next year is a rebuild year. You hope it's a more enjoyable year. Like, it wouldn't shock me if they went 4-8 next year, or 5-7 and 6-6. But I think it'll be a much more watchable 4-8, 5-7, 6-6 season than it was this past year. And I think we've heard some talk that I think his contract will be up to all the way to 2029. I think that makes sense. I do think this is going to take a year or two rebuild. Where you hope at that point you're a serious contender for the Big 12 title and get to a playoff at some point during his time here. That's the goal.
Elo, how do you want to see this staff he puts together look? Do you want to see a mixture of UCF guys? Do you want to see some veteran guys, some guys on the current staff? How do you want to see him build this staff?
Well, I think you always want to say you want to see UCF, but you want the best guys. And I'm going to give you the guy that I'm most fascinated to see if he comes back, and that's Travis Fisher, who I believe is the defensive back coach now at Syracuse.
Yep.
I thought he did a good job when he was here the first time around. From what I understand, he's done pretty well at Syracuse. Like, that's a guy if you can get him back to help the secondary, which I thought was a downgrade this past year. I think that's a plus. That would be the guy. I know everybody's going to talk about KZ, but to me, Travis Fisher is the guy that I'm intrigued to see. Does he come back? I would expect Sean Beckham to stay. The guy's a lifer. Is versatile as a coach. So I think that's another UCF name. I am curious to see who does he retain. Does he retain Cam Barton as a running back coach? Does he retain the defensive line? I don't know. I think that's going to be very interesting to see what Scott believes as far as the staff's concerned and what he's comfortable with. It has to be his staff, has to be his call. It'll be interesting to see what he feels is best for this team come 2025 with this roster he built.
Andrew, how I mean, obviously you mentioned earlier you knew a little bit about Scott Frost before you got here. How much do you think his name will still resonate with high school players and kids in the transfer portal who are thinking about UCF? Do you think that's a name that people say, okay, that's a destination I want to go to because I know who Coach Frost is?
Yeah, I think it plays part in the history. I mean, all you have to do is search up his name, look up what he's done. It's not he's no stranger around town in Orlando. I'll tell you that much. He most certainly has built a culture. He built a legacy at UCF. People talk about legacies all the time. He has a legacy. He's one of the most remembered head coaches at UCF, if not the most. So there is no reason for players not to know who he is. And if they don't know, it's like, hey, Coach Frost called me from UCF. Just look what he's done with this program. And I think a lot of people who want to play in Orlando are going to think this is a head coach I want to play for.
Eric Lopez, see you on Around the Kingdom. Andrew Cherico, see you out at the arena. Men's basketball coming up at 1. Thanks, guys, for being with us on Brunch with the Suns.
Yes, sir. And it's Shaquem Griffin.
Thanks. You nailed it, Andrew. You nailed it.
He really takes that mimosa concept a little far.
Well, he did. Yeah, I don't even think I could say the name the way he said it, and the chat blew up, and I could not stop laughing. So,
total rebuild here. Where are you at on that? Andrew assigned 80% to it. Of course, we still don't know who's back, who's going into the portal. Would you welcome guys that have indicated they want to go into the portal back now that they know who their head coach is going to be?
I think so. I don't think anybody's trashed a program on the way out as they've hit the portal. I think they all had their reasons, and if that change of Scott Frost is helpful to them to stay here, I wouldn't be against that. I think Eric asked a great question. Like, who's the name on offense you're excited about coming back? And I think that tells you where we are from. I mean, Randy Pittman, maybe. Like, I think that tells you where we are from a rebuild standpoint. Is who's the name? Who's the piece that you're like, I can't wait to see person X in Scott Frost's offense. I don't know we have that name right now. And if that's the answer, then we're looking at a pretty significant need of talent infusion, which probably means a bit of a rebuild for the 2025 season.
Let's continue this conversation with noted UCF alum Jeremy Taché, FanDuel Sports Miami, Meadowlark Media. Good to be with us on Sons of UCF, the brunch edition. Jeremy, how much wind in the sails does this mean for you in an on-air capacity? You've got something to talk about now in 2025.
Oh my gosh, guys, I can't even tell you the difference in just general vibes when thinking about having to talk about UCF as opposed to what it was going to be like going into next year when Gus Malzahn was going to be the head coach initially. Things have completely turned on a dime. And it's so funny because we were all cracking jokes at the beginning of the year as the sort of fire Gus train started on Twitter, which was, hey, why not bring back Scott Frost? And it seemed like this, insane, theoretical, nostalgic, never going to happen scenario, especially given where Gus had been. And now to be here, guys, I can't tell you how excited I am. The whole production truck last night at the Heat game. Afterward, I'm trying to talk to them about, our game. We just had this big win, blah, blah, blah. And all I could talk about is, hey, guys, did you see? It's official. Scott Frost 5 minutes ago. Did you see the news? It's so exciting.
What does Scott Frost mean to you?
Oh, man. He provided some of the most fun moments I've ever had watching sports with my family. The USF game, and I've told this story, I screamed so loud during the Mike Hughes kick return for a touchdown in that game that my neighbors thought there might be a dispute going on in the household. That's the level of freak out that I had. But genuinely, his team that he built, the identity that they built, because I only began watching UCF when I was a freshman in college, which was 2013. So my first experience was Blake Bortles winning a Fiesta Bowl.
You had a pretty good run as a
It was a cool run. It was great. But this my senior year was Frost's his first season. And so I graduated into, and really, I mean, if we could be real about my job, like some of the first stuff I got to do on local Miami radio down here was defend the merits of the undefeated UCF teams. And that was right after I graduated from college. And it kind of helped me network down here. So his 2017 team, and the brand identity that it created, along with Danny White and the concept of, national champions were in your face. And that was sort of the thing I was talking about with a lot of folk last night. Was it felt like over the 4 years of Gus Malzahn, while the marketing team, the social media team, everybody tried to keep UCF feeling the same way as the young, innovative, in-your-face type of brand, that got sucked away from what it was that started under Frost, continued to an extent under Heupel, but I think the way some folks felt about Josh Heupel on the way out was bored. And then for Gus Malzahn to just completely go, to his sort of traditional college football ways, which are maybe the right thing to bring you into a Power Four conference, but have the attitude again that existed of like, F you, we're the best, we don't care what you think. And that's going into a year where I don't even know who's going to be on the roster. I'm just excited for what it might mean.
Jeremy, they say you can't go home again, right? But obviously Frost is going to do that. Why do you think it's going to work this time around?
I think that, look, it could go one of two ways, right? Like it could be the same type of disaster that happened at Nebraska for him. I think there's a million reasons why coaching at UCF and coaching at Nebraska, if you're Scott Frost, are two very different things. I also think, look, we've seen a lot of coaches struggle somewhere, go away for a minute, end up as an offensive analyst somewhere else, and then come back to head coaching and do a dang good job. In this case, it's just going back to the same university that you left. But, he wasn't fired from UCF. He took another opportunity. We've seen how many quotes of basically, if it wasn't Nebraska, I never would have left that place. Like he loved it here. We loved him. Everybody left while on bad terms because of the red checkered shirt underneath during a conference championship game. Outside of that, like he's beloved. You know what I mean?
It doesn't seem very important, does it?
It doesn't. Now that
George
back,
O'Leary's big crime was his resume.
Yeah, right, exactly. So when you end up here with Scott Frost, it's like, I think the more time that's passed, the more that everyone remembers every ounce of it fondly. And I think that there are probably a lot of lessons that Scott Frost learned from his experience at Nebraska and the couple of years since. He's now been working alongside Sean McVay, which I can't think would be a bad thing. He's an innovative offensive coach in a conference that seems pretty wide open for the future of the conference. And, all the advantages that we know that exist by coaching in Central Florida. Like the recruiting ground is great, particularly for him. I think the guy can still really coach offense, and I'm sure he's learned a thing or two about, leading a organization from the experiences he had at Nebraska. So I think it's a perfect pairing. Like I think UCF needed to do something drastic. And while you could think that would be hiring like some 32-year-old offensive coordinator and kind of doing almost the same type of thing that you did with Frost, why not just do it again?
Jeremy, there's a press conference 5:00 today. Scott Frost will be announced. You've been to plenty of press conferences in your career. What's something you want to hear from Frost when he takes the mic today and reintroduces himself to UCF?
I'd like to see him focus on embracing both like the past and the future. And by that, I mean, it felt like under the Gus Malzahn era, it was the future of college football, right? And it was all only focused on what was ahead. And while that's like incredibly important, part of the reason this hire is fun is the nostalgia. But in a real note, in building a program with tradition, where the fan base can unite around something, bring back, have a lot of the guys that you coached in 2017 come visit. For that honor, a couple of them come coach. Create a culture, set a culture. And that's the thing that I know so many of these guys that played for Scott Frost on those teams at UCF spoke about, is like he has a built-in culture. And as someone who works around an organization that talks a lot about culture, I could tell you, like, it's not talk. Like, when you really build something special, it makes an inherent difference in who wants to play for you, the development that they have under you. So for both the fan base and the team's, benefit, I think embracing some of that's important. And then I think I'd love to hear the lessons he thinks he learned in the time he's been away, right? Like, you leave here on such a high note, and both he and the program have had the strangest highs and lows ever since. And so I would love to know, what he feels he learned about leading a program and the difference of entering UCF in the state that it is here in 2024, as opposed to where it was, back in 2016.
What do you make of the narrative, high risk, high reward? Do you consider this a risky move by Terry Mohajir?
I don't really consider it very risky, because I also think it'll be kind of easy to evaluate whether or not this was the right decision actually relatively quickly. Like, it doesn't necessarily result in the wins and losses. It does result in some of the vibes around what's going on after year one. And I think that you'll be able to tell whether this is the UCF Scott Frost or the Nebraska Scott Frost pretty quickly. I think that the reason it's low risk is if you can evaluate that quickly, I think that it's not the end of the world in modern college football to miss on a coach. And when you talk about how the fan base feels and how the recruiting ground feels with this injection of fun and nostalgia and FU, we're the national champs again, I think that creates a base of, you've already pleased the fan base by making the hire to begin with. It's what the fan base wanted, certainly over the other options. And I think that there's still a high ceiling. I mean, we've seen the type of coaching Scott Frost could do at UCF. I don't see why things have to be any different this time. And this time he won't have to go undefeated twice and stay healthy in order to make a playoff. He'd just have to go like 10-2.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, he plugs back into a rich recruiting ground. That hasn't changed. The world vacations in Central Florida.
Yeah.
More money now available to UCF than when he was here. And the conference allows him, as we have seen with Arizona State, to be in a playoff position.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's crazy is he's entering at such a better time than he did last time, right? Like, he was coming into a team that literally was the most embarrassing team in college football the season before. That's what he entered into, a winless UCF. And within 2 years, they were undefeated off of recruiting classes that by numbers weren't any special. And looking back at it, were some of the most special recruiting classes in the country. Like, with dynamic players, with a legendary college quarterback. To me, I think that his ability to get the most out of his players, which we saw him do here, right? Taking a bunch of dudes that are 3-star recruits for whatever reason, instead of being 4-star recruits, guys that were undersized or not fast enough, and make them look big or make them look fast because of the way that he schemed things. If he could do that with what the resources were when he entered with a winless team, things are in place. More guys committed, even more guys signed just a couple days ago, technically not knowing who the coach was going to be, that are going to be playmakers that are higher rated than any of the dudes that he turned into stars. So if he can have those types of resources, and he had good recruiting classes at Nebraska, a place that is impossible to recruit. So now you're here, you're not competing against the narrative of being in a lesser conference. For that matter, if you're looking versus the ACC in terms of recruiting, look, the Big 12 champion's probably getting a bye in a half hour, where the ACC champion did not. So you can even say, we're right there with any conference in the country. If we win this conference, we'll go get a bye in the first round of a playoff. You can do that as a freshman because the Big 12's wide open. Look what I did in 2 years, what I turned around the first time. The recruiting pitch is there. So to me, I think it's fertile ground for him to come back in with a chip on his shoulder, the program having a chip on our shoulder, the fan base having a chip on our shoulder. Like that's the type of vibe that I'm really looking forward to. And I'm looking forward to watching how this all unfolds over, the next 8 months before the season actually starts.
A week and a half. That's what you got to love about sports. A low for the program, a complete flip in the narrative.
Yeah.
And as you said, vibes strong going into 2025. Jeremy Taché, thanks for being with us on Brunch with the Suns.
Thank you guys. And hey, go Knights.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Charge on. All right, we put a wrap on matters, Adam. I like what's being said about the chip on the shoulder, and you heard how Jeremy described it. We need that attitude back, and that attitude has been missing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think if you think about any coach I'll take you all behind the curtain here a little bit at the Sons of UCF universe. All week, I had been preparing an article I was going to release where I had titled it "Hello, Coach." And first time it was "Hello, Coach Chadwell." I deleted that. "Hello, Coach Summerall." I deleted that. "Hello, Coach Odom." I deleted that. And what the article was about was explaining to that new coach what it means to be at UCF from the very early years, chip on the shoulder. You don't belong here. You're not a Power 5 conference. And I was writing all that out as kind of an article to say, welcome to the university, coach. Here's what you need to know. As of this morning, I no longer need to write that article. Right? Because Scott Frost knows all of those things already. He did all of those things. He's a part of those things. I think that's the piece you can't hopefully underestimate is he knows what it means to be at this place. But he also understands the history and the chip on the shoulder and all that went there. So my article became defunct when I don't need to explain that to the man who was a part of getting UCF to that part. So I think that's the thing that you hang your hat on and you feel good about is that he understands and hopefully gets the DNA of how this program came to be where they are, and that he also continues to coach with a chip on the shoulder. Because let's be realistic, Scott's been free for 22 months. I don't know. I'm not in contact with him. How many times is he getting called about coaching jobs? I don't know. How many times did he get head coaching opportunities? I don't know. So there may be a chip on his shoulder as well to say, you know what, I was kind of an outcast. I was forgotten because of what happened, and I've been kind of jettisoned, and I've recharged the batteries, and I want to get back in this thing. So hopefully he comes with the chip on the shoulder that he brings. UCF has a chip on their shoulder, and that leads to championships.
I see what you did there. All right, what's next? Men's basketball, the tip-off at 1 o'clock against Tarleton, and then the highlight of the day, the 5 o'clock presser streaming on ESPN+, the reintroduction of Scott Frost as UCF's new head football coach. Who'd have thunk saying that just a little over a week ago? For Adam, I'm Trace Trilko. Go Knights.
Charge on, everybody.